cool things about living in Chile is how old school some of this stuff still is. This is like the most common way to toast your bread here in Chile. And I mean, I know in the States they used to have them back in the day. I like vintage and old movies and stuff, so I see it all the time. But yeah, this is how everybody still toasts their bread today, is on an old toaster just like this. So just thought I'd share that real quick. Every once in a while, the bottom of it burns out, and you have to buy a new one, or it gets so hot that the bottom plate down there starts to lift up and touch the grill, and then it doesn't do a very good job. It just burns your bread. But I mean, I want to say they're like $3 for one of these at the store. So, and this one we've actually had a while now. I want to say we've had it around 5 years. Hey, well, today, I'm sorry, trying to get to where the sun isn't like behind me. Today, I have found a little bit more about the turbo. I looked at the truck yesterday, and I've been assessing the time that I have and what I can and can't get done right now. And so what I did was, instead of taking the intercooler off for the moment, I will take it off and clean it out and all that, like Clayton had suggested from the Holden Jackaroo Isuzu Trooper page on Facebook. And also, as Brad Blake mentioned, I'll get to his suggestions too. But unfortunately, I just have to drive it right now. I did go ahead and clean the turbo itself, though. Right there on the turbo, I cleaned it all off. You can tell there's less oil and stuff. But I did notice that it's drizzling oil out the bottom of that hose again, and that's as tight as I can get it. So I'm pretty sure that it is the turbo that's spraying the oil. I'm pretty sure the seals are gone on it. I'm going to have to just simply get in there and take it all apart and look at it and see how the propellers look and see how everything looks. But at the moment, I mean, from yesterday to today, the amount of oil on it's minimal, but there's definitely something coming out of that hose as far as the amount of turbo, the amount of oil on it. I'll just have to kind of keep going and seeing what happens to it from there. I mean, that's kind of what I have to do for that. I've got to figure out a different air box for sure. Those of you who haven't seen, this is the kind of makeshift airbox adaptation plate that the previous owner put on here. This airbox, from what I understand, as I thought yesterday, it was confirmed by Clayton, who is a Holden Jackaroo enthusiast and knows a lot about these motors. He told me that this is not the airbox off of the actual 2.8 diesel motor. This is actually, from what I found, a Chevy Love. The Chevy Loves that they continued to make after they were taken out of the U.S., which is like a 93 model or something, Chevy Love, or a Holden Rodeo, as they're called in Australia. This is that airbox to it. So what it is that unlike the typical, here I'm going to unlock this. Contrary to the typical diesel airboxes with a cylindrical filter inside it that has the wire mesh or the metal with perforated holes and then some kind of filtering system that has higher flow in it, this is a paper multi-baffle filter. And we were talking about it, and it seems that this is probably not allowing the system to breathe like it should. And what that does, from what Clayton was explaining to me, is that it does not allow the turbo to breathe as easy as it needs, and therefore it puts stress on the seals of the turbo, which would completely explain why I have what seems to be leaky turbo seals. So the next thing for me to do is just see if I can actually rebuild this turbo, or if I'm going to have to buy a new one. Let's hope I don't have to buy a new one. If I have to buy a new one, at least I know it'll be new. If I have to rebuild it, I'll do that too. I'll just see. And when I was talking to Clayton yesterday, we talked about the EGR setup that they have just left there and disconnected. But I do have plans on blocking that off with with 2 plates. It's just getting around to it all. You know how it goes. You can see that I've had to do a bunch of, I'll go over a few things that I've had to do on this motor if anybody's interested. If not, well, you'll just have to either stop the video or go on. A couple of things that happened though with this swap that they did and the way that they did it is, first off, it has a mechanical fuel pump on it right there. Right in that area. So as that mechanical fuel pump, as you can probably see it better now, yeah, there you go. As that mechanical fuel pump does not need a fuel pump in the tank, they should have taken the fuel pump out of the tank. Did they? I don't know. I'm hoping so, because that can cause problems. But they have, I think so, because it's running the way it should, and that wouldn't have probably happened if they hadn't. But they had taken really thin, I think I have some of it laying around here somewhere. They took really, really thin wire hose that was plastic, and they had the fuel line plugged in basically right here to a rubber hose that went inside there and had a hose clamp. So where this copper is, because they didn't have steel here, that was actually a plastic hose stuck inside this hose. And then they had a hose clamp on it. So you can imagine how well that worked. In fact, it was opposite. This hose was there, and then they had the rubber hose, or the plastic, hard plastic line stuck up inside of it with the hose clamp on it. The problem is, this is the direction of the fuel pump. So one night I was out in Puerto Montt, and they didn't have it wire tied, zip tied or anything. It was just hanging back there, this hard rubber line or plastic line. And these 2 pieces came undone because, like I said, this one was on the outside and the other one was rammed up inside there with the hose clamp. And this hose fell behind the motor, and this hose fell toward the ground, and it was at night, and I couldn't see it. But I noticed there was a bunch of diesel on the ground. So it took us forever to find these hoses, and that's what had happened. And then it slipped out on me like 4 more times. So I was looking for this kind of steel, you know, this typical steel line that you use for gas and like this stuff here. Oh, there. This stuff here. But nobody sells that, so I had to go with copper. And I got the copper. Actually, I'm sorry, that's the return line. So it was like this, and it pushed it like that. I'm getting confused. So this actually pushed itself out of this, and then diesel just went everywhere all over the ground. So that's what happened there, and they had it like that, I don't know how long, who knows how long they did that, but that was causing an issue. And then also, if you look down here, I've still got to fix this, but I haven't found a switch that I can use. This is all taped up and stuff because this plug here is actually off of another vehicle, and they pried it apart with a screwdriver trying to get the wire out of it off the other vehicle so that they could put this wire in it. But then they broke the tabs in there so they couldn't clamp it down on there, and the wire was just loosely hanging in there. So I'd be driving and the pump would cut out. The fuel pump would cut out on me. And the truck would act like it was dying, and then it would make contact again, it'd start back up and it'd run. And one day it just left me, I couldn't figure it out. I was looking at everything that had to do with the fuel pump, never thought about the wire. One day I was just I was just, you know, stuck. And so I started fiddling around with everything. I accidentally hit that wire, and it made contact, and it worked. So then I had to go, and I've tried to replace that plug. But what happened is this plug is so short that comes off the fuel pump that I can't really splice it because I can't cut that one off and put a new one in without taking the fuel pump off. I can't get to it enough. There's not enough wire because they just cut it too short and didn't put an extension lead on it. So I'm going to have to try to figure out what I'm going to do about that because this is just not working. In fact, one day my delivery line here, right there, broke because it was an old piece of hose. I've changed it for a new piece of hose. And it sprayed all over it, and that wire, that electrical tape came loose because of the diesel being on it, and I lost it again. It wouldn't crank again. So they've done a bunch of like really jacked up stuff with this. And if you see this here, This here is actually my speedometer cable. Not my speedometer, my throttle cable. That's what it is, not speedometer cable. And as you can see, it's just like a loop. It comes out and it makes a loop around, because the V6 motor, the 3.2 that was in here, actually wrapped further around. I think it's to like right there or something where the throttle body is, and that's where it connected, so it needed that length. Well, this isn't, they don't need that length, and I haven't found anybody who's willing to shorten this cable for me. And I have to take it all out and all stuff, which I might end up doing anyway. I think I finally found the guy. But this is how they have it set up. And one day, I was driving and the accelerator got stuck. And it was because this had gotten pushed way down here or something like that. And it wasn't allowing the accelerator cable inside there to return like it should. And it got stuck at like 5,000 RPM. I had to pump it a couple times to get it to go down, and then I had to stop the truck, of course, and get out and look at what was going on. And of course I was in like my best clothes, you know, not out in daily clothes, just nice clothes. I think we went out to dinner or something. So it was just it's been an interesting go with this truck. It's a good truck. It just needs maintenance, and I think I've talked about it before, and I don't want anybody to get offended, because I don't want anybody to think I don't think kindly of people here in Chile. But it's not so much a factor of thinking kindly of people. It's the fact that the majority, not all, but the majority of Chile is still a very third world country. And so therefore they do things within their budget. They do things in a third world country manner. These motors are very, very common to swap in because of the gas or the fuel efficiency of them. Diesel in Chile is cheaper than gas, and the fuel efficiency of them is the benefiting factor. They're underpowered for this vehicle. They have nice torque, but they just are a little underpowered. But the fuel efficiency of them makes it worth it. So when they do these, just as that airbox you saw, they just pick whatever they can. And to them, a lot of them, these guys who say they're mechanics, well, I mean, we all know mechanics even in the States or wherever you live, I'm sure, that say they're a mechanic, and they don't know anything about airflow, CFMs, or any. I mean, they don't know anything, and so they just say, "Oh, well, this is an Isuzu airbox, and this is an Isuzu motor, and a Trooper is an Isuzu product. So if I use this airbox and that motor, then it works." And that's not always true, of course. And then the other things like the throttle cables, instead of spending the $50 for a good throttle cable to make sure that they're, you know, safe and whatnot, they just throw a throttle cable. They just leave the same throttle cable and wrap it around and say, you know, we're good. So it's just a bunch of stuff like that that really is third world, typical in third world countries. Unfortunately, safety is not a high priority for a lot of things here, even in work and construction. I mean, big companies have to follow safety regulations, but small people, small companies or individuals, they never, ever do anything like that. So it's just challenges that I face living here. Now I've got to figure out what I'm going to do. I guess I'm going to either fabricate myself an airbox, or I'm going to look for a Toyota, like a 2.8 Hilux or 3.0 Hilux airbox, or maybe even, I don't know, maybe a Hyundai Galloper or a Terracon airbox from one of their diesel motors. It's a 2.5, but it should be. I'll have to look into some of this stuff. I just honestly do not know. That's the thing. I've got to do some investigating, as this all just came up recently. But of course, the turbo I've got to look at. I've got to see how the propellers look. I've got to see how the bearings look. If the propellers and the bearings are shot, then there's no point really in me even making an effort whatsoever to try and repair that turbo. From what I was talking with Clayton last night, I'll just have to go and change the turbo out. I'm probably going to make a different intake as well. They've done some funky stuff. With this intake here, like right there where it meets, I don't know if you can see my finger there, but right there where it meets the turbo, it's not the right size, so they actually had a collar turned, which is the interior diameter as the exterior of the inlet of the turbo, and the exterior of the collar is the interior of the rubber hosing, and they have clamped it around, and these two pieces here aren't the same size, so they just used a hose clamp around that, and I can just pull real hard and that all comes off. And then you've got this here that's off of something else, and so nothing really fits in there. It doesn't flow real well. In fact, if you look inside this elbow here, there's actually a tube, and I had to cut a half moon out of it, because there's like this tube that sticks up almost to the top of here, and there's barely any airflow going through there, so I had to modify that to try to make it work. And so I'm just probably going to end up making my own, honestly. I'll just end up making my own air intake eventually. It's all time. When do I do it? That's the question. I'm just running out of time.